Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're plunging into a topic that really touches the very core of who we understand God to be and on how we ourselves deal with wrongs. We're talking about the intricate dance of divine justice, vengeance, and mercy. It's a profound conversation and a deeply personal one for so many, I think.
Absolutely, and we've really pulled together a fascinating stack of sources for this deep dive. We're drawing from rigorous theological essays, even a candid Reddit discussion about atonement, which was quite insightful, and surprising insights from neuroscience on the very nature of revenge itself.
Neuroscience. Interesting.
Yeah, our mission really is to cut through some of the noise, synthesize these varied perspectives, and uncover what divine justice truly means, not just as a concept, but how it profoundly impacts our lives.
All right, let's peel back the layers on this one then. That white-hot impulse, the gut reaction when someone betrays us or lies or wounds us deep. It's the desire for payback. Our minds whisper these promises of closure, of balancing the scales, maybe finally feeling even. But if we're honest with ourselves, what does chasing that feeling actually deliver?
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Because while our gut tells us revenge will satisfy, study after study in psychology consistently shows it just doesn't heal.
Right.
It actually keeps the wound festering. It prolongs the anger, the resentment, trapping us in this cycle of bitterness that can even show up as physical health problems. Often the person who sought it just feels empty, conflicted, still kind of chained to the original offense.
So it's destructive.
Yeah.
It escalates conflict instead of solving it, which I guess begs a critical question. If our own wiring for revenge is so flawed and unfulfilling, why do we so often project this human desire for payback onto God? You know, it's not uncommon to hear people, both inside and outside religious communities, express a real struggle with the idea of an angry God.
Definitely.
For some, it feels primitive, maybe even dangerous. It leads many to want to soften or perhaps even completely remove the doctrine of divine wrath from their beliefs.
That's a vital point, and our sources really unpack why this discomfort might be a fairly recent thing. For instance, some scholars, like C.H. Dodd, suggested that God's wrath isn't an act of emotion, but simply the inevitable, sort of impersonal cause and effect of a moral universe.
Like consequences.
Exactly, a passive response where sin just reaps its own consequences, like you see in Romans 1. But what's fascinating is that our sources emphasize that downplaying divine wrath isn't just some minor theological tweak.
Okay.
It fundamentally reshapes our understanding of the gospel message itself and deeply impacts views on really core concepts like atonement and even hell.
And when you actually, read the Bible, it's not exactly shy about this, is it?
Not at all.
It contains over 600 references to divine wrath, expressed in the strongest, most vivid metaphors. You see things like burning and kindle, like in 2 Kings, or that really firm language in Nahum. The Lord is a jealous and avenging God. The Lord is avenging and wrathful.
What stands out there is the striking lack of embarrassment or hesitation from the biblical writers themselves.
Right.
In their view, God's wrath isn't a problem to be explained away. It's more like the long-awaited righteous vindication of justice. And it's definitely not just an Old Testament thing. No, look at Revelation. It paints this powerful picture of a warrior Christ who comes to tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. That doesn't really sound like a hands-off, impersonal process, does it?
No, it really doesn't. It makes you wonder, like J.I. Packer asked, why, when the Bible is vocal about God's wrath, should we feel obliged to be silent? It also seems like we're more uncomfortable with it than the ancient authors were.
Precisely. And historically, this discomfort seems to be mainly a recent Western thing. Pre-modern Christians largely integrated this doctrine without much apparent issue. Early creeds affirm Christ shall come to judge the quick and the dead and mention sentencing to everlasting fire. It was central.
That brings up a really provocative point, I think. Why is the idea of God's wrath often seem to cause the most discomfort in, well, the most affluent and comfortable societies? Slav Volf, a theologian who spent time in war-torn regions, argues pretty powerfully that when you're faced with truly brutal evil like sitting with a rape victim or walking through Auschwitz, the idea of an angry God rarely strikes you as offensive. Instead, it feels almost necessary, like a righteous, fitting part of how the world should be governed, a proper response to profound injustice.
And if we connect this to just basic human psychology, it reveals something quite profound. Truly good, loving people get angry precisely because they are good and loving.
Right, it's a reaction to wrong.
Exactly. Anger, in that sense, isn't a flaw. It's how goodness responds to evil. As Tim Keller puts it, a God who never gets angry. A God who just leaves the cry of the victim echoing unanswered for eternity. Well, That wouldn't be a good God, and therefore, arguably, not God at all.
Human revenge is destructive, but God's anger is tied to his goodness and justice.
Yeah.
How do we make sense of passages where God talks about vengeance? Like when Paul writes in Romans, "Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, 'Vengeance is mine, I will repay,' says the Lord." It sounds like it's not God thirsting for petty payback, but maybe an invitation to lay down a burden we weren't meant to carry, like a relief.
It's a crucial distinction, and the language itself helps. The Greek word Paul uses there, ektikosis, isn't about personal rage or impulse.
Okay.
It's actually a legal term. It's built from ek, meaning out of, and diko, meaning justice. So it means an action that comes out of justice.
Yeah.
Like a vindication, a setting of things in order from a place of perfect impartiality. Think less personal vendetta, more judge's final, equitable ruling.
Got it.
And similarly, the Hebrew word nakwam, often translated vengeance, has this core meaning of correcting an injustice. It's about God, the ultimate fair judge, restoring the balance that's been violated, like a master artist carefully straightening a crooked painting, not just smashing it in frustration.
So this divine vengeance is completely different from our flawed human urge for revenge. It's not about retribution, it's about restoration.
Exactly.
Divine justice, though, is rooted in God's perfect knowledge, absolute moral clarity, and this ultimate desire to restore and redeem.
Even that famous Old Testament law, an eye for an eye, is often really misunderstood.
How so?
Well, in its original context, it wasn't a license for revenge at all. It was a principle of limitation. It was designed to stop the endless cycle of escalating retaliation, to make sure justice was proportional to the offense, not some uncontrolled explosion. It was actually about restraining vengeance, not promoting it.
That puts a totally different spin on it. And the ultimate picture, this whole idea, God's righteous judgment and ultimate restoration, it really comes into focus with Jesus, doesn't it? I mean, where do we see God's perfect justice against sin and injustice most profoundly displayed? It has to be the cross. On the cross, the full weight of divine justice, God's holy wrath against all the brokenness, the evil, the pain in the world, God didn't just ignore the injustice, he absorbed it.
Right.
He satisfied the demands of his own perfect justice, not by destroying us, but by redeeming us through the ultimate act of sacrificial love. God executing perfect justice on sin, while at the exact same moment providing the ultimate path for mercy.
And this leads us straight into a crucial and often intensely debated question within theology. Precisely whose justice is satisfied by Jesus' suffering as part of the atonement?
Okay.
And maybe before we dive into those distinctions, let's just quickly define atonement. Basically, it's the theological concept of how humanity gets reconciled with God, typically through Jesus' sacrifice. Our sources explore several pretty compelling viewpoints.
Okay.
Well, God requires it.
God requires the payment.
Yes. God is holy and just, and humanity's sin is seen as an offense to his honor, his righteousness. Therefore, he demands that someone or something pay for these offenses to uphold his own perfect nature. This is the kind of powerful idea behind, say, Jonathan Edwards' famous sermon, Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God.
Right, I've heard of that.
Now, critics of this view often raise a challenging question. Does it imply that God, kills innocent Jesus just to satisfy his own anger?
That can sound harsh.
For some, it can feel like a portrayal of, familial abuse almost. And it can leave individuals with deep feelings of guilt and shame towards Jesus, acknowledging it's a powerful but sometimes difficult metaphor.
Okay, so that's one view.
Another perspective suggests that it's not God directly, but maybe the universe or some eternal law of justice that requires it.
A law above God.
Well, that's the question it raises. This view is found in some Latter-day Saint teachings, for instance, citing passages like Alma 42, which emphasizes that the work of justice could not be destroyed. If so, God would cease to be God. It asks, "What do you suppose that mercy can rob justice? I say unto you, nay, not one whit. If so, God would cease to be God."
So justice is this inviolable principle.
That's the idea. But this viewpoint raises different questions too. Does it mean God himself is subject to some higher concept of justice? And if so, how does that affect his sovereignty, his freedom?
How so?
Well, modern lenders often voluntarily forgive debts, right? They don't always need a mediator. They just release their claim. So the question becomes, if we humans can do that, shouldn't God be at least as generous?
And that really gets to the heart of the word forgive, doesn't it? It literally means to refrain from or release one's rightful claim, implying no debt is actually paid, just released, let go.
Exactly. And a key insight from our sources is the exploration of alternative models. These treat atonement and sin not solely as like a legal transaction of punishment for actions, but more as a journey of becoming.
Becoming.
Yeah. These models acknowledge that our theological explanations are metaphors, right? Imperfect attempts to grasp something huge. In this becoming model, every act we take leaves an eternal imprint on our spirit. And because of sin's effects, we simply can't become pure and righteous enough on our own to be like God.
Spiritually damaged.
So Jesus' atonement and suffering somehow short-circuits this process. It's almost like spiritual surgery.
Okay.
This lets us resume our progress toward becoming a perfected soul.
So in this view, Jesus' death wasn't just a tragedy, but a necessary step for him to gain this unique, divine ability to cleanse our souls without destroying us.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Then there's another nuanced perspective that emphasizes justice not just as external punishment, but as the inevitable internal outcome of our own choices.
Natural consequences again.
When we sin, we inflict wounds, spiritual, emotional, upon ourselves and others. Justice, then, in its rawest form, would simply be to let those self-inflicted wounds injure us forever. So the atonement, in this view, heals these spiritual injuries. Christ suffers the consequences in our place, not primarily to satisfy an angry God who demands blood, but because choices must have meaning and the resulting pain must be stopped somehow. And he has the power to intervene and end that cycle for us.
So pulling these threads together, if God's justice isn't about petty payback, is it more that God demands justice out of love? Our sources seem to suggest something really profound here, that God's justice and mercy, which might seem incompatible to us, actually form this beautiful, profound unity within his character.
Right.
Yeah. While other religions might portray God's mercy as being exercised at the expense of justice, Christianity seems to offer a unique perspective.
It does. Christianity posits that God's mercy is shown through his justice. Think about it again. At the cross, God's justice was meted out in full upon Christ.
Right.
Yet simultaneously, God's mercy was extended in full to all who believe. Christ's death perfectly demonstrated God's righteousness, meaning his perfect justice was totally upheld, while also justifying those who have faith in Jesus.
So, in essence, God's perfect mercy was exercised through his perfect justice.
Wow.
That's a revolutionary idea when you really sit with it. And what's truly compelling, I think, is how this understanding of divine justice connects directly to our own minds, our own well-being. You mentioned neuroscience earlier.
Yes. Research shows that spiritual practices actively strengthen the prefrontal cortex,
The decision-making part of the brain.
the region responsible for cognitive control, emotional regulation, and strengthening that significantly reduces our natural impulsive tendency toward revenge.
So spirituality literally changes the brain to make us less vengeful.
The evidence points that way. It's powerful, isn't it? Revenge promises justice and relief, but as we said, it often delivers spiritual death. It's frequently the ego's ultimate protection mechanism, and it actually activates reward circuits in the brain like an addiction.
Giving you a temp high.
Precisely, which can create this destructive cycle. Fleeting satisfaction followed by deeper pain. And this can even escalate into broader collective revenge narratives where whole groups feel wronged and seek retribution, sometimes leading to highly charged social movements we see today.
And the data seems to support the counter effect, too.
Yeah.
You said religious individuals show less physical aggression.
Yeah, about 12% less, according to the sources cited. And Jesus' response to his executioners, "Father, forgive them," isn't just presented as a lofty moral ideal. It's framed as the true self's authentic, freeing response to injustice.
So spirituality acts as an antidote.
It seems to. Research clearly demonstrates that having a robust spiritual framework can provide the meaning-making that dissolves those victimization narratives that fuel revenge. In fact, studies show faith-based forgiveness interventions are actually twice as effective as purely secular approaches. They offer unique resources for healing. One study specifically showed Christians who actively prayed for their offenders experienced significantly greater increases in empathy, religious commitment, and crucially, forgiveness itself.
That makes so much sense. So prayer and meditation aren't just, feel-good activities. They help expand our theory of mind, our capacity to understand and empathize with others' perspectives, which boosts our emotional regulation.
Exactly.
In spiritual terms, it allows us to hold both justice and mercy, just as, in the Christian view, Jesus did.
And the neuroscience is remarkably clear on this. Forgiveness literally shuts down pain centers and revenge cravings in the brain.
Really?
Yeah. And simultaneously, it activates brain networks associated with relief and positive emotional states. Choosing to forgive actually delivers true strength and profound freedom, neurologically speaking.
So practices like, say, the examine, they can literally rewire the brain for mercy over retaliation.
Regular prayer reduces stress responses, and even imaginative prayer, like placing yourself in gospel scenes, has been shown to create new neural pathways for compassion.
That's incredible.
But again, this isn't about becoming a doormat or passively ignoring injustice. Not at all. Instead, it's about discovering the profound freedom that comes when you're no longer enslaved to other people's actions or, frankly, to your own wounded pride. Ultimately, God's vengeance, as the Bible presents it, is fundamentally different from what many people might imagine. It isn't the impulsive rage of some tribal deity.
Yep.
It's presented as the slow, steady, perfect outworking of divine justice. And that justice isn't just about punishing wrong, it's about powerfully restoring what was broken, setting things right. Understanding this is meant to be one of the most liberating and peace-giving truths for a person of faith.
It allows you to take that heavy, crushing burden, the anger, the bitterness, the relentless need for payback off your own shoulder and place it into the hands of the only one who can handle it with perfect justice and wisdom. It frees you, doesn't it? From being emotionally chained to the person who hurt you. It lets you move forward.
This is what truly allows you to begin healing. It frees you from that endless mental loop, replaying the offense over and over. It empowers you to live with open hands and a lighter heart, confident that ultimate justice isn't your job, it's His.
So thinking about all this, what's the practical implication for you listening right now? If God's justice is ultimately restorative, and if we're called to embody His nature in some way, what specific action might you take, maybe even today, to choose restoration over retribution in your own life or perhaps in your community?